Recently, I had a chance to interview fellow homeschool mom and art teacher, Miss Jess from Hello Homeschool Art. This was a really great conversation with her, and one of my biggest takeaways is where she reminded me that in things like art lessons, it's so important to keep an open mind and to allow our kids to make mistakes, right? Because that's all part of the learning process and everybody does it. So the more we give our kids opportunity to explore their creativity, even while making some mistakes along the way, the better off they will be. She also gave a really important reminder as we think about our kids' futures and what they might want to do when they grow up, that it will be these types of kids who have been allowed to explore and think outside the box. They are the ones that will be the real problem solvers as they get older and are faced with different types of situations. So art can be beneficial in so many ways for a child's education. I hope you'll enjoy our conversation, so let's dive in. Welcome back to the Morning Basket Music Channel. I'm Leann, a homeschool mom of two kiddos and a music educator. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. Her name is Miss Jess from Hello Homeschool Art. So thank you for joining me today, Jess.
Thank you for having me, Leann. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, when I've been browsing through your YouTube channel and your website, which is just awesome, I've seen that you have so many cool art things for homeschoolers to offer. So I definitely want to get into some of that today. But would you just start us off by introducing us to yourself and your family and tell us kind of where you're at in your teaching journey?
Sure. So I'm a homeschool mom as well, and I have two kids. We live in Wisconsin, and we've been homeschooling since 2020. But really, I feel we were homeschooling even before then, before they went into school. But it was something always on my heart. They did go to a school temporarily before we decided to homeschool, but it just was always the right fit. And once we decided to make it work, it just has been the perfect fit for us since then. So
That's awesome. And how old are your kids or what grades are they in?
ninth grade and fifth grade this year.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. Very
Mhm.
cool. All right, so to kind of start off our conversation today, by the way, I have been wanting to talk to an art teacher because I just do see so many correlations between music and art. And I feel like as teachers, we probably share a lot of, similar goals and values, right? We're both trying to help kids explore their creativity and express themselves that way. So I did some browsing on your YouTube channel and I came across this video where you're demonstrating some warm-ups that somebody could use for an art lesson. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I was like, I'm not sure I ever thought about warming up for an art lesson in the same way that I think about music, right? I'm like, well, of
Mhm.
course, if I'm going to sing or play an instrument, there are warm-ups to do for that. But explain what that looks like in relation to an art lesson. What kinds of things can we do to get ready for that?
Sure. So things as simple as just moving your hands and moving a line across a page can be a good warm up. But I also like to tell parents that a warm up isn't always necessary at all. So even though I might share some warm ups and I might recommend warm ups for certain projects,
Mhm.
especially something that's going to be archival or a gift, I might have certain warm ups that I recommend for that. If a child is excited to just jump right in, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm,
There should never be that stopping point of halting the energy in order to stop and do a warm up. Just
mm,
integrate it if it feels right, or if the child is the type that really likes to have that rhythm of warming themselves up before jumping in. But there are also a lot of kids who just want to jump in and they don't want to warm up, and that's
sure.
okay. I like to give that permission. It's all right to not warm up. But if your child is very young and just starting to draw, then some exercises like making circles and making waves are just excellent warm-ups for getting ready to make art to help
Hmm.
them feel more successful when they do make art.
Okay, that's really cool. Yeah. And do you feel like sometimes it also kind of helps them not get the jitters out, but like I'm gonna go ahead and do some of my experimenting before I start on like the real thing, right?
Absolutely, right.
Hmm.
Especially if they're going to make a large drawing or
Hmm.
something. I always recommend make a few little just scratchy thumbnail versions first and test
Mm.
out a few ideas before you commit because it can be a great way to just have that bit of practice beforehand to really visualize as well,
Hmm.
because seeing little versions of it will really help them fine tune what they want to create on a bigger scale. And
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that, especially I am not able to see pictures in my mind.
Mm.
So for me, it's very useful to make little versions before I make a big version.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'd be the same way. Like, well, I have it in my head, but actually getting it onto paper is easier said than done sometimes. So, if people watch some of my other videos, they will often hear me making comparisons between how I want kids learning music and learning art. I see, again, a lot of correlations. For example, I feel like with music, I want kids to be active participants, right? So rather than just teaching them about composers and listening to classical pieces, like that's one part of the puzzle, right?
Mhm.
But if they're never allowed to actually experience music and make music themselves, I feel like, that's what they need to do to have a complete picture. And so, in terms of art, I'm wondering if you agree with this too, where, we want them learning about famous artists and studying pieces of art, but we also want to give them plenty of practice, like hands-on practice, right, to create their own stuff. So, along those lines, what are some of those like fundamental art skills that you're hoping kids get a chance to practice?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think about it and I realize my philosophy behind art education isn't rooted in skill, but it's
Hmm.
rooted in confidence building and problem solving, which all
Hmm.
starts with exploration and freedom to improvise.
Hmm.
And that's really what art is about, right? We're dealing with something that is not objective. And so there are no rules, really. Even though we might have technique that we can teach, I don't like to teach that there's any one way to do anything specific because that isn't what art is about.
Right.
And so most children are not going to be pursuing a career in art.
Hmm.
So, in order to really take on those unseen benefits of creating art, they need to keep an open mind. So, I like to shy away from teaching specific techniques in a formal way, and instead, I like to sneak them in and drip them in to lessons where they don't even know that they're
Hmm.
learning techniques, but also to keep it open-ended, keep it casual, and always remind them that when you are an artist, you get to make your own choices. So here is one way that I can show you, but
Hmm.
maybe you want to explore a new way, a different way. Try something else, see what happens. It's about experimentation, improvisation, and building up that confidence to not be afraid to improvise.
Hmm.
That's the most important lesson in art to me. So, like you said, there's time and there's an interest in maybe learning about art history and about artists, but to me as a teacher, that's not the most important thing and that is not the main lesson. That's
Right.
not the goal for me when I teach art. My goal is really to help them unlock that piece of their brain that allows for creative thinking and problem solving in real time while they are exploring and
Hmm.
learning about themselves and art and what they can do with it.
Mm, I love that. Love
Yeah.
that answer. And yes, keeping an open mind, improvising, 100%. Okay, so that brings me to my next question. I'll just say I'm asking for a friend, okay? If someone hypothetically has a type A perfectionist type child, and really I was one of those myself too. I've grown out of it a little bit, but especially when it comes to something you're creating like art, how do we help those kids who they do want rules to follow? And, they want to get it right or wrong. They want to get it right. Um, but maybe they've created a piece of art and they're just not happy with it because they feel like they messed up whatever. And what I have found definitely does not work is when they bring you their picture, their drawing, whatever, and just, oh, honey, that looks amazing. Like I think it's wonderful. And it's like that almost makes it worse, because they're maybe so self-critical and they don't like what they've made. So give us some help here. How can we help them just enjoy the process and not be so focused on the actual product itself?
I love that you asked this question because I've worked with so many perfectionist kids, and they're
Mm,
actually the ones who influenced my entire philosophy when it comes
mm,
to teaching art. And they have informed the way that I have evolved as a teacher as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, a perfectionist kid needs to be allowed to make mistakes, and that starts in the lesson. And so, I think that it's vital and it's important as the educator to create that safe space to allow for experimentation and to encourage messing up
Mm-hmm.
because when you're playing it safe, then you're going to be very focused on a specific outcome. But when you're allowed to explore and to not have any too specific outcome that is expected, that is when they can start to unlock those little bits of their brain that tells them it's okay to not look a certain way. It starts in the lesson and the way it's developed and making sure that it is open-ended at least to a point. So techniques and certain types of art can be taught without it having to look a certain way, right? A lesson can start off by step directed, do this, but then open-ended for the whole
Mm-hmm.
second half, right?
Mm-hmm.
And encouraging playing and not keeping it within the safe parameters, thinking outside the box, is where it starts and where they can start to unravel that perfectionist tendency.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with trying to get them to make a mistake. And
Yeah.
I have found that the more that I can be open about my own mistakes, the
Mm.
more I can influence those kids and they can see that it's okay. And I can demonstrate I made a mistake here, but let me think about how I'm going to work my way through this and what I'm going
Mm.
to do to adapt. And
Yes.
so I will
Mm-hmm.
never start over. I usually will never use an eraser for a mistake. I'll only use an eraser to clean up extra lines, but I am not going to start over. I often will teach with a marker so that if I make a mistake, it's a great opportunity for me to share how I'm going to work my way through my mistake instead of starting over. So, teaching the open mind, teaching that art is a process
Mm-hmm.
and it's not linear necessarily.
Yeah. Oh,
It
that
is
just
evolving.
right, right. I love what you said. It's like even what you were just sort of modeling of like, I'm going to almost speak my thoughts out loud as I'm creating the art in front of them so they can see my own problem solving and like the thoughts that might be going through my head. And really what you're doing is you're just modeling like how to adapt in real time, right?
Right, right.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It can be tempting when making a lesson to try to make my lesson even perfect, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm making a lesson for someone, but it's
Right.
actually more valuable if I can make it imperfect so that I can model the
Mm,
resilience and problem solving because I realize that's really a more important part of the lesson
hmm
than making the art itself.
hmm
So, another thing that I like to always reinforce is you never want your art to be an exact copy of mine
hmm
or your neighbors or your friends. And so, we're really, really just not focused on making copies. There's no imagination in that. We're really focused on exploring and
hmm
always encouraging that. So I make mistakes all the time to try to
Sure.
just make it a lesson.
Yeah. Even when you're not trying, right? It
Right,
happens.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then I'm curious, do you ever have your students critique their own art or tell what they think about it? Like maybe before you share any thoughts with them?
Oftentimes, in my live classes, I
Mm-hmm.
usually have very social classes.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes they'll be teaching or not teaching. I guess they're teaching me about their art, aren't they?
Right.
I give them a lot of space to create and to make their own choices in their art, and then they're able to tell me about them.
hmm
Not so much in a critiquing capacity, but more so in a public speaking practice sort of way. So we
Mm-hmm.
integrate a little bit of social as well into that. And at the level of most of the classes that I'm teaching, because these kids are not looking to really become artists, but they're really looking to build that confidence and to explore and to feel more comfortable creating. They are not self-critiquing so much as they are just sharing excitement. And that
hmm
is really the foundational exercise. And then when they maybe transition into a one-on-one with me or something where we can critique a bit more, then it becomes more of a teacher student critique type of
Mhm.
situation. But most of my students, they're not worried about the critique so much
Right.
until they get to the level where they're asking, how can I make this specific style better? And then we
Mm.
get into the technique and the tools and the
Mhm.
different tips and what might be adjusted to improve. But the whole foundational part of art lessons for me and the majority of kids that I work with, they don't need that yet. And when
Mhm.
we move that in too quickly, too fast, they start to tell themselves, I'm not good at art,
Mm.
I'm not getting it. So, really, the focus needs to be on building the confidence and the excitement first. And then they get to that stage where they're asking for the critique.
Mhm.
That's
I
where I
love
like
that.
to step it in.
Mm. Do you feel like that stage, like, is that around a certain age or grade level, or is it's probably different for every
Oh,
kid?
it's all over the
Yeah.
place, right?
Hmm.
Because some of them just make art for the love of art and they never really are looking to become a professional. But
Hmm.
then there are some who, by the age of 7, would like to know, how can I make this better? And they're so
Hmm.
receptive to it.
Yeah.
So there's a huge range,
Hmm.
sometimes around age 12 to 14 that's a pretty common age for, I think, students to start to ask for some actual technique that they can apply. But
Hmm.
before then, with the exception of some students that just are prodigies, maybe,
Hmm. I
they
gotcha.
they mostly just are more influenced by the creative expression and the joy that comes from it
Hmm.
than the critique.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Okay, so another thing I want to mention, I'm going to be sure to link this in the video description.
Mhm.
I know you wrote a blog post recently, just kind of outlining some of your favorite resources and materials. So let's say someone is just getting started with homeschooling and they definitely want to include art as part of the education before they just run out to, the craft store and pick up whatever. Give us kind of a list of like maybe your top 5 things. What would you want people to be looking for?
Yeah, so you don't have to overthink it. That's my main thing. Don't overthink it. You
Mhm.
don't need anything fancy.
Mhm.
Don't buy the most expensive stuff. We're just exploring and learning. So I like to always reassure everyone there's a lot you can do with copy paper. You don't
Yeah,
necessarily need
yeah.
a lot of specialty paper for very much aside from painting. So
Mm.
copy paper is great just for doodles and drawing and getting started. So you don't need
Mhm.
too much fancy stuff. For
Yeah.
more archival artwork, it's good to have maybe some multimedia paper on hand. That'll be a little thicker. You can use for acrylic painting and then watercolor paints and watercolor paper. I think if you have copy paper and watercolor paper, you have enough to do so many projects.
Mm.
And then also a recycling bin. You can do so many crafts with recycling
Yeah.
materials that are
Yeah.
in your bin that can just be pulled out. So if you've got watercolor paper and paints, and you've got paper, copy paper, or multimedia paper, pencils, erasers. There are hundreds of projects that you can do just with that. And you don't have to break the bank on the watercolors or anything.
Mm.
I use student sets just to show that
Yeah.
you don't need professional materials.
Hmm.
My whole watercolor set was maybe $7. So it's not
There you
something
go.
you need to invest a lot of money
Good.
in.
That's good news. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so something else just popped into my brain because we have, if I were to turn my camera around, we have papers all over this house, and they're making stuff every day. And I love that.
Yeah.
Not everything is keepsake worthy. Some of it definitely is. But how do you handle, like just in your own home, how do you handle the
Mhm.
amount of papers? How long do you hold on to something? And then what do you do afterwards?
Oh, yeah. That that
Practically
is
speaking.
that is something. Well,
Yeah.
I myself produce so much art every week from just teaching classes. So I
Hmm.
have I've gotten very used to recycling the majority of what I create, but I
Hmm.
also have I have a filing cabinet where I keep some special pieces and then I hang some up as well.
Hmm.
And my kids do the same thing. So we've got an area where we've got gallery wall
Hmm.
and they hang up whatever they'd like. I also found these really cool frames that can open up and then you can put a picture in there, but you could
Hmm.
put multiple. It's a thick frame, so
Uh-huh.
they can slide a new one in and
I think I've seen
keep the
those.
rest
Yeah.
behind. Those are really
Okay.
nice to swap
Yeah.
it out. But a lot of our artwork, when we're feeling like we're ready to let it go, we just take a
Hmm.
picture of it.
Hmm.
We have a digital copy forever.
There you go.
So that is the best. And then there are so
Yeah.
many digital frames nowadays. You can
Hmm.
put it as a screensaver for a computer. That digitizing is the way to go. You can even
Hmm.
have a book printed with the artwork if you really want to. So that's helped keep the paper down a bit around here,
Hmm.
and we recycle a lot of our art pretty frequently because it can stack up.
Sure. Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And then it's, you think they're done with something because it's been a year and you're about to recycle it and it's like, oh, I can't believe you're gonna throw that away. Oh, but yeah, those are good
Yeah.
ideas though. Okay, so we've definitely talked about a lot of the practical things. I do want to wrap this up with more of a philosophical question for you. So,
Mhm.
based on your teaching experience, and just all the many, I'm sure, thousands of kids that you've taught over the years, what have you seen? Like, give us some reasons why you think that art is so beneficial in a child's education.
Oh, art can be so beneficial for a lot of reasons, but one of them is just the fine motor skills that it's the obvious answer,
Hmm.
right? Fine motor skills is it's something that as they're not handwriting as much, art can really take the place of a lot of what they're losing as kids are using computers
Mm.
earlier in their
Hmm.
lives. So a lot of art can replace some of what's being lost there as they're not writing with their hands as much. But even more important than that, I think, is thinking outside the box because the problem solving, confidence building, and the creative thinking that is learned by making art but making it in a creative and open-ended way is beneficial to all areas of life.
Mm.
So, in the future, when they are in any type of job, there will be a time when someone needs to come up with a creative solution. And it's the artsy kids who have trained their brains to think outside the box that are going to
Right.
be ones that can offer a solution
Mm.
more easily and more readily than those who may have only thought analytically
Right.
through their lives. And as a child, I was naturally analytical, even though I was also creative and I was
Hmm.
very, very artistic, but I wasn't naturally creative. But I learned that you can learn to be creative.
Mm.
But you
Interesting.
can only learn by doing it. So
Right.
through making art, I learned to be more creative, and it helped me in so many ways in my life. And now I have a creative thinking ability that I maybe wasn't born with, but I
Yeah.
nurtured within myself. So that's the kind of stuff that art is really beneficial for.
I
It's
think
not
that's
to be a
really,
pro artist.
yeah, well, exactly. But I think that's important for parents to hear too, because well, we all are born a certain way. We have our natural tendencies. I'm similar too, but I think it goes to show that, a fixed mindset is something that it can be changed, right? It does take a
Mhm.
lot of practice, a lot of experiences doing stuff like that. But yeah, we can change our way of thinking and we can grow and move towards more of a growth mindset. So yeah, I love that. Um, and before I have you go in and kind of describe the different types of classes and things that you offer, what do you say to the parent who does want art to be a part of their kids' education, but they're like, well, I myself am just not an artsy person. Like I didn't grow up that way and I don't have any of those skills, but I want them to have it. What advice do you offer them?
That's exactly why I started my program,
Hmm.
really, because I know a lot of homeschooling parents, and a lot of them don't know where to start with art.
Sure.
And so much time can be wasted trying to find art projects online that might
Hmm.
be incomplete, or they might be missing a step, or maybe they're just not the best quality.
Hmm.
So that's exactly why I started to make my homeschool art program because I was already teaching kids online in group classes. They weren't all homeschooled though.
Hmm.
And then I realized there really is a need for art projects that are just sort of open and go, that are easy for
Hmm.
parents who know nothing about art, easy supply lists, and something where I can do all of the teaching for them.
Hmm.
And the parents can just go sit and have a coffee and have a relax, or the parents can jump in and do the art with the kids, right?
Hmm.
So having a partner like me or like another art teacher who can step in and take art off your plate
Hmm.
is is exactly what I would recommend for a parent who feels lost with art. You're not
Hmm.
expected to do it all on your own or to try to learn how to do it so that
Hmm.
you can teach it.
Yeah.
So you can there are resources. You can use resources that will do it for you.
We're very fortunate to be living in this time where there is
Yeah.
so much, yeah, available. So I'm sure people will go on your website and they can find the different things you offer, but is it a combination of group classes and one-on-one, or how does your program work?
My homeschool art program is a family art club that includes a weekly new lesson
Okay.
every week within a theme for the month, but then also a library of past lessons. So some of the families will follow each weekly lesson with the themes in real time, and other families just skip that altogether and they just dig out art projects from the library
Okay.
and do whatever they'd like. So that is my homeschool art program. I also teach live online classes on other platforms as well.
Hmm.
So some of my students join me there. And for the Family Art Club, there is an option that includes a live class once a month as well. So some of the
Okay.
families like to join for that to get connections with other homeschool families. And
Hmm.
others just like the more casual, hands-off approach. They don't want to join live, but they're just wanting to access the art lessons. So
Hmm.
there's options for whatever suits any
Hmm.
family's needs.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think I saw something. Do you also offer like there's a free lesson that people can go watch to check it out?
Oh, there is. Yes,
Okay.
yes, there is one lesson that you could try for free
Hmm.
that is just one sampling. There are so many different types of lessons. Most of them are either focused on drawing, painting, acrylic or watercolor, or
Hmm.
crafting. So the one that's in there is actually a fun marker lesson that involves water. So it's a unique one, which is
Okay.
fun. It's just a little sampling of one of the lessons, but they're always so different that you never
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
it's going to be.
All right. Well, then bonus question. Do you have a favorite thing that you like to teach?
Oh,
I'm
I
sure
feel
that's
like
hard.
every time I teach a new lesson, it's my new favorite.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess I've always been a fan of variety when it comes to everything,
Hmm.
food and colors and everything.
Yeah.
And I feel that every time I explore and teach a new art lesson, that becomes my new favorite for the week. And then there's something
Hmm.
else. Like when I taught this silly goose watercolor painting, it became my favorite thing. And then I did a mosaic, and then that became my favorite. And so
Oh.
living and
Yeah.
exploring, I guess, is my favorite thing.
Yes. Variety is the spice of life. That's
That's
true.
right.
That's true. Well, thank you, Jess. This has been so much fun, and I know people are going to be excited to go check out all the things on your website. And again, I'll be sure to link your blog posts and everything. So this has been a lot of fun, and thank you for all the different things that you're offering and putting out there for the homeschool community.
Of course. It was so nice meeting with you. Thanks for having me.